And hello, everyone. My name is Nick Jasper, and I'm a manager here on the PATS team at the Groove. My areas of expertise include absence, time tracking, and scheduling. And today I'll be highlighting some exciting new release features in those areas. So to kick us off, the first one I want to cover today is the new request time off optional fields. So this is an absence feature, and basically, Workday added configurable visibility options for both absence balances and the request absence micro calendar within the configure optional fields task. So basically, this will allow admins to hide either absence balances or the request absence micro calendar view for all users or specific security groups or even secure to workers meeting defined condition rules within the optional fields task. And basically, some challenges this is going to solve is definitely enhanced control over any sensitive absence balance information. Maybe, for example, you have a certain population that can see absence balances while others can't. You'd be able to secure that through the optional fields. And then same thing for the request absence micro calendar. Maybe you have a certain population you don't want to use that micro calendar and you want to use more of the manage absence task. You can choose to take off or remove that option altogether. And it definitely greatly simplifies the time off request experience for select populations. Again, maybe a certain population doesn't use the request absence micro calendar for time off. They just want to use it for a leave of absence. I've got some screenshots coming up in the next two slides just to kind of show what that would look like and how it would be easier for that use case. But you'll be able to remove that from view again through the configure optional fields task. And it even enables targeted configuration without any custom security changes. So we're not going to be jumping into the domain security policies. It'll again be all managed within the optional fields. Now, overall, some deployment considerations. So this does require configuration within the optional fields under the request time off section. So basically, you'll just be able to go into that request time off section and add which options we want to change the visibility for. So again, we can choose to hide for all across the tenant, or you can select specific security groups. Again, in the case of salaried exempt workers who may track balances, whereas other populations wouldn't. You can choose to hide or show based on security group or even based on worker-based condition rules. So overall, this is a low level effort to implement. Again, it's just all managed within the optional fields and it makes it much easier again than jumping into the domain policies. But if we jump to the next slide here, I've got some screenshots to kind of show the before and after. So up top here, specifically for the absence balance visibility optional field, on the left, we've got the manage absence task. It's a little small there, but you can see that it shows the absence balances for the worker. In this case, we've got floating holidays, sick time, maybe there's PTO, vacation, all that good stuff. And on the right side, we have the request absence micro task or the micro calendar, which in this case is turned on. So you can view balances in both tasks. Whereas if you choose to hide it, you can see on the bottom here in the manage and request absence calendars, you no longer have the ability to view those balances. And then if we can jump to the next slide as well, I showed a before and after of the request absence calendar visibility. So again, let's say on the left, there's the use case where we want to leave it on. We want the request absence micro calendar to be the go-to, maybe even in conjunction with the manage absence task. So you have multiple, ways that a worker can request time off and leave of absence. But let's say you want to turn that off and make sure that it's only the start and end date selection. So on the right side, you'll see what the after looks like when you choose to hide that calendar. And again, I mentioned leave of absence because leave of absence is more of a estimated and start and end date for the most part. So maybe that's easier for the worker or more straightforward for the workers to, select the start and end dates rather than, clicking specific dates on the calendar. I feel like it just kind of makes the whole experience a little easier. And then just kind of sums it down a little bit. But again, no need to, adjust any domain security policies. Again, it's all within the optional fields, so it makes it a bit easier. And then for the second release, I'd like to highlight. So again, this is kind of all the above, an absence, time tracking, and some scheduling. All part of Workday's intention to build a more connected experience because all those areas are so closely related. And we have a lot of clients within Workday that, are live on absence and time tracking, and we see a ton more adopting scheduling as well. So the idea of bringing and kind of bridging the three areas together has been a priority of Workday's the last few releases. And with this one specifically, it's the hide unavailable time off from time tracking checkbox that they delivered. So basically, I have seen in the past, even with clients that don't necessarily use Workday scheduling within Workday, the idea of a time off or a time off type specifically used for tracking unavailable time to work. So whether it's within Workday scheduling where workers get, a varying schedule week to week or month to month, or even some type of external system for scheduling workers. I've seen the option of an unavailable time off where a worker can pretty much say, hey, I have a doctor's appointment next week on a day I typically work, but I'm going to request this time off to show that I'm unavailable so I don't get scheduled. This makes that whole process much easier within Workday whenever scheduling is involved. So basically, Workday delivered a checkbox on all time offs, whether net new or time offs that already exist that you'd like to edit to enable this feature that hides the time off from time tracking. So what I mean by this is that whenever a worker is looking to request this time off to say, hey, pretty much I'm unavailable at this day or this time, what this checkbox will do is make sure that that time off is not displayed on the worker's time entry calendar. Make sure that doesn't get included in any calculations or time calculations when it shouldn't be. That goes with totals and all that as well. It kind of just removes the work tag piece of the time off within time tracking. And then lastly, it won't restrict any time entry. So that's a very important piece because let's say, you would like to be off on a certain day or like to be unavailable, but maybe it's a blackout day and you do need to work, it's not going to limit the worker from entering time on that day. So it's a very important piece because we know that that does happen in real world case. Um, so some business challenges this might solve. So again, with Workday scheduling, if you're familiar with the scheduling side of Workday, there is a task for change my work availability as the worker itself. So pretty much I would be able to say, hey, starting on this date and ending on this date, you can effective date your work availability. So I can basically say as a worker, I'm working Monday through Thursday, but Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, I have prior obligations I cannot work. And then let's say a month from now, the schedule's not out yet, and I have a doctor's appointment on a Tuesday. So I would be able to request this time off on the time off side, and it'll flow down to scheduling and time tracking, but it won't affect any time tracking pieces. So basically, it's more for non-recurring unavailability changes rather than creating a whole new availability change event where it's effective dated. And then after that change in my availability, I would have to go back in and readjust my change work availability tasks. So again, it's really for those short-term changes of work availability or for those one-off unavailability periods. And two big challenges this will solve is any external discussions. So maybe I tell my manager, hey, I do have that doctor's appointment next month on a Tuesday. Typically I would work, but next month I can't. If that conversation is not maintained or it's not written down or maintained somewhere, that could kind of just slip through the cracks and maybe the worker would be scheduled. With this new release, we'll be able to report on it and make it more concrete and trackable for, that unavailable time. Some deployment considerations, again, I mentioned, but Workday scheduling must be turned on and time off specifically for unavailable time off would need to be created. And then you also need to check that hide from time tracking box, again, creating net new or editing any existing time offs. So overall, just because of needing the scheduling and kind of wanting to test the time tracking side as it flows from time off to time tracking, I put an overall level of effort to implement as a medium for now. All right. So this next one is time tracking specific. And this one I, as a time tracking consultant, am extremely excited about. It's going to make my life a lot easier for time tracking implementations. And that's segmented security for time entry codes. If you are familiar with absence or some of the other HCM areas, you may have heard of or seen the segmented security for time offs or segmented security for leave types. Basically, it's how you enable a worker or a security group or group of workers within a security group access to a certain time off or a leave type. We are now getting that delivered for time entry codes. It is optional, but basically you can allow users to, or allow admins to configure which code workers or employee as self or managers, admins, or other security groups can enter. One important piece here is that whenever, let's say I as an employee cannot enter a certain code, but my manager and admin can enter it on my behalf. If I don't have the segmented security access for that time code, I would not be able to edit or delete those time blocks for that code. So it's really important where prior to this, this goes into the business challenges it'll solve. So again, on my end, having put this together so many times without segmented security, you have to make sure you build separate time codes, separate time code groups, separate eligibility rules that contain count fields to make sure I'm pointing at all of the right pieces to say, hey, employees cannot enter this, but maybe a manager can, or maybe only a timekeeper can. This gets rid of all of that kind of mess of calculations and additional configuration needed, so we can kind of streamline it. And it also, with that, I mean, we can even reduce payroll errors or admin rework caused by misrepresenting that time. And again, even kind of the headache of having to test all the rules from all the different perspectives. This will make it more streamlined to put together. Some deployment considerations. This is, again, optional for now. So you would have to opt in by going into the edit tenant setup for HCM and enabling the segmented security for time entry codes checkbox. So basically that'll activate this configuration. And then you would be able to configure those segmented security groups for time off codes and then add them to the access time entry code segmented domain policy with view and modified permissions. So overall, this is a medium level of effort to implement. It's not overly complicated, but does involve some security and some net new configuration. All right, the last one here. This release was pretty heavy on time tracking, and this is a really exciting one. I feel like this is going to, be a hot topic moving forward, but obviously Workday is definitely implementing a lot with AI. And they released this new feature for AI time approval assistance using the frontline agents. So basically, you can use a new frontline agent within time tracking, and it's optional with using this frontline agent, but you can enable it to pretty much view and vet any typical time count or time entry calendars when workers submit their time for the week. So let's say, you have a high volume of time entry calendars from a manager perspective that they would need to review. AI will pretty much learn from the manager and timekeepers what a typical time calendar looks like, not only for workers specifically, but for multiple groups of workers to say, this is a very typical time entry calendar for this worker in this population, in this location, etc. So the AI can automatically approve that time calendar. Now, if there's any anomalies or anything that doesn't necessarily look right, or there's a lot of warnings and errors, the AI will flag it for review and send it directly to the manager to pretty much say, hey, you need to take a look at this just to make sure all looks good. Um, so again, it'll really approve those routine timesheets and greatly reduce any admin burden for managers or timekeepers who may have to review high volumes of timesheets for workers. And definitely with that, improve payroll accuracy. A human can look at the same time calendar many times and probably will still make a mistake at some point. But it definitely helps reduce this, any systematical errors that might happen. And then with that also lowers labor costs and allows managers and timekeepers to focus their efforts elsewhere other than improving, again, those high volume of timesheets. Some deployment considerations. So there's quite a few on this. Overall, it is going to be a high level of effort to implement, but again, it will pay off in the end because of its, it's just ease of use once it's all set up. But basically, you'll be able to enable the agent system of record in the maintain functional areas, and then you'd have to register and activate the frontline agent in the agent management hub. This use case does need flex credits to use this AI agent, this frontline agent, for this specific use case. And then you'd also have to update security policies, business process permissions, and opt into the time anomalies. So again, the time anomalies piece of this is optional, but once you enable it, you'd be able to use it for this case. And the last very important piece is that production data training is recommended. I put it in italics because it's pretty much required. You would need to, once you enable this and turn it on in the tenant, managers and timekeepers would need to pretty much approve manually all these time sheets for a month or two or a good amount of weeks, just so that the AI can learn what a typically approved time sheet looks like. So it's really just using that machine learning to get used to what's typical and what would be considered an anomaly.